was a very interesting story I did recently, an interview on the movie called Ellen. A mother that had strangled her own child.
This is the story of Ellen Pakkies.
Ellen Pakkies, yes. So the movie that came out, very interesting story. I've interviewed Ellen myself personally, did documentaries at the house, etc. But when I watched that particular movie, because, we all read the stories, we all did the interviews, but when you saw the real depiction of that particular moment in her life, it was almost so real, because all of us know somebody that struggles with drugs. All of us know a mother that is struggling with a child that is on drugs. So when you do these interviews and these discussions, you can almost, begin to understand and get into the psyche of people. And we're often confronted with that particular issue here at Radio 786, because we sit in our cars sometimes on the N2 and we're upset with people that threw feces across the road. But why would somebody be so desperate to do so? It's to get attention. It's because they live in squalor every day. They have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to stand in long queues to go to a toilet that we have in close proximity in our own homes. So it's sort of those contextual issues that we need to be alive to in order for us to fully understand and root out journalism in.
And this is real life. I mean, it's the reality for majority of South Africans, particularly in this country today.
That is so true. And I memean, when you're on the streets, you're covering certain stories. I must tell you, my job is very different these days. I do the show. I'm not as much, in the field as I used to be. But when I used to do those things, it used to give me so much energy and determination to tell these stories. When people are being evicted from their homes, just the agony that they're feeling during that moment. So I've had a wide range of issues that I covered, one of which, landed me a national award. And that was the story around farm workers and their plight. And it was one of those very surreal moments where you got face to face with a story that was very raw, that has its roots deeply, rooted, or it's deeply rooted in the history of our country. So to see that overlap to our current modern day setting was a very real moment for me. So yes, to answer your question, you have to, be alive to what the situation is on the ground in order for us to give expression on the radio, so everybody else can understand where these people are coming from.
So you were nominated for this award?
The way it works is that you apply as a media house, and you compete first regionally. So I won regionally in the Western Cape. I was nominated as the Journalist of the Year in the News and Current Affairs category for radio. Then you automatically get entered nationally. So you compete on a national level. You compete against the SABC, Prime Media, all of those stations.
The top dogs of radio.
And in fact, there was a special assignment feature that was also competing at the time in my slot. And Alhamdulillah, I was able to win the national award.
Well done. Well,
it happened a few years ago, but it's one of those very moments, because I was a very young journalist still.
But it's one of those poignant milestones of your life. I mean, so it's regardless of how long ago it happened. I mean,
it is. Yes, I did a lot of work in that particular feature, but that feature was really just farm workers telling their story, and that is what I wanted to do, which is why we went to the Dorings. Went running around in between shacks and dodging rubber bullets at the time. And I think that is really what as I look back, that is what that award represents. It's the ability of people to really tell their own story.
Yes. I mean, something you mentioned earlier on, the example of the movie now that depicts, of course, Ellen Pakkies' life and the very real challenge she dealt with dealing with her drug addicted son. And so it wasn't only substance abuse that she was dealing with, but the abuse of her, the effects of the substance abuse from her son, and to the extent that she actually killed him, correct?
She strangled him with a piece of rope after having given him a cup of tea. He was drugged up. It was the 18th time that he stole from them, that he abused her. He nearly stabbed her once. It's a very violent depiction of a child abusing their mother, which in our society sometimes is unheard of. One could even, the older generation who shudder to think that even if they talk back to their parents, what a grave sin that is. So here you saw a very violent attack on a mother, but the point of the story, and at the time, 10 years ago, by the way, this year and this past month, when this entire incident happened, the point is that drugs demonized this particular young person. And very interesting about this story, because I wrote about this, in an online publication, that what the Ellen Paki story represents is a number of things. The one is a young man who was faced with a challenge around identity and crisis, who he was, finding out that his mother had been raped and he doesn't know who his father is. He's the son of a incident of a rape. And he immediately goes into a self-identity crisis, and he doesn't know how to deal with it. And what is his next outlet? He becomes naughty in school. He starts abusing drugs. So it's what that particular story tells me, or that moment of that story tells me, is that not every drug addict is just somebody that's a loser in life, that's not willing to do anything with their lives. Circumstances have pushed them into that hole. Life has dealt him a bad hand. And then on the other hand, you deal with a demonized society by drugs, where the cycle spirals and spirals, and it breaks down families in the way that is depicted in that movie, with Ellen being abused, the husband threatening to walk away, etc. So all of these are little signs of broader, both internal psychological issues and societal issues that confront ordinary families. And it's a real tragic story, but a tragic that so many Cape Townian or Cape Flats communities can identify with.
Tashreeq, your empathy, I suppose, as a journalist, you have to almost immerse yourself into your story. I mean, to effectively translate, to transmit the story of the whatever you're covering. So my next question to you: how would you describe yourself in 3 words?
That's very difficult. I think if I were, it's very difficult sometimes to describe oneself, especially if it's a good things. I would tend to think that I'm hardworking. I would tend to think that I'm dedicated. What could be the same thing. But also, I guess to a certain degree, I'm somebody that battles with himself constantly. Where I am, who I am, what I am, where am I going, what's my purpose in life, why was I born here, why was I placed here? Crisis, perhaps? Not to the degree of to the point that I'm going to go self-destruct or anything like that. No, and not necessarily depression or anything like that. It's a real problem, depression and mental health issues. But I tend to often go through these different paces in my life where I look at what the purpose of my life is, and I tend to always use the very bad example. If you die right now, everybody's going to weep, they're going to cry, they're going to say, oh, we missed Tashreeq on the radio, my family, my loved ones going to miss me. 3 months later, it is as if though you were never there. Sure. So you ask yourself then, what is your purpose in life? What are you doing? And of course, that is why we have a creator, we have a God. Allah tells you to work towards your afterlife, etc. Those are important things. So I have these ebbs and flows in my life where I go through trying to stick to some path or the other. I mean, it's a challenging thing, and yeah, so it's very difficult to describe oneself. But what I can tell in terms of my day-to-day stuff, dedicated and committed, that's certainly what I am.
So definitely that's one of the reasons why you're on our platform today, because our mantra is, of course, as accidentalmuslims.com, living with purpose. It says that right on the banner over there. Tashreeq, do you have any mentors that guides you, that you look up to, that you know, that you don't know?
I think I've had mentors in my life, particularly when I just started out my career in broadcasting. People that, both from a professional perspective, assisted me in the work that I did here at the radio. But then there were also people that, because I was a young child, I was a youngster growing up, I came to the radio at the age of 13 while I was still in high school, came to volunteer here, etc. And so thankfully, thankfully there were these people that assisted, in my upbringing. They, both from a professional and a personal perspective, it was remarkable to have noticed these mentors. Some have passed on, some are still around, and I must tell you that all my friends, and I'm talking about my actual friends, both some that I work with and both my personal life. One of them are older than what I am. People always say I'm an old soul, I'm older for my age, which I'm fine with, and I'm totally cool with that. But I find inspiration in some of these people, and I see them as almost this unofficial mentor. So mentorship is very important, yes.
Sure. Well, so from one old soul to another, how do you approach challenges? I mean, what's your leadership style?
There's one thing I don't do. In the moment of crisis, in the moment of tension, I don't hit the ceiling. I try to take a step back. I try to assess the situation. Of course, there are heated moments, and all of us have our shortcomings, we have lapses, etc. But for the most part, I'm extremely calm in moments of crises, in whatever issues may confront me as a person, but also within the organization that I lead. So calm-headed, try to look for the best possible solution. And I'm not somebody that is obsessed with finding the right solution. Sometimes we have to make mistakes, in order to learn from them and take a different path. The journey always has to be the same. The